Welcome to episode 2 of the NonFun Gerbils podcast. We're joined today by Jake Brukhman of Coinfund. Jake has an extensive and varied background coming from a base of mathematics and computer science. He's deeply embedded in the crypto space and is an investor, artist, and curator in the NFT art world. We had a brilliant conversation about many aspects of non-fungible tokens and art, including how NFTs make it easier for artists to monetize their talents, how they can be an investment asset for retail investors. We look at platforms that make it easy to tokenize work, virtual 3D worlds that allow you to find and buy art, the role of Instagram, and how NFTs are one of the few areas of crypto actually creating revenue. Stick around at the end where we read out some of our favorite entries into the very first NonFunGerbil token giveaway and announce the winner, which was used as the blueprint for the final artwork. This conversation was recorded on the 6th of August, 2019. We hope you enjoy it as much as we did.
Jake, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a huge pleasure to have you on. We've known each other a few years from back in the early days, and I was thrilled to find out that you were falling down the NFT rabbit hole.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
So I thought, to begin with, it would be just a good idea to get a bit about your background and how you got into crypto, and let's go from there.
Sure. Well, my background is in mathematics and computer science. I used to go to school for that here in New Jersey and New York City. I went to graduate school for mathematics as well. Then for about 5 years, I worked in the hedge fund space here in New York, doing technology mostly and quantitative trading. And then for about 2 years, I was a technical product manager and engineer at Amazon and ran a team of about 10 folks doing ad tech back in 2012. And then became a CTO of a fintech startup who was doing research on basically like the financial models of private technology companies before they went to IPO. Companies like Uber, where it was like really interesting to know whether, is Uber profitable kind of as they head toward going public. But of course, this was back in 2015 or so. Along the way, I learned about Bitcoin. I had a good friend here in Brooklyn who showed me Bitcoin in 2011. I started buying Bitcoin in 2013 on Coinbase, and I believe it was November, if I recall correctly. And then I found out about Ethereum, and I like to say, and I've said this before on podcasts, I kind of finished reading the Ethereum white paper. It was at work, and I put it down and I looked at the wall for like 30 minutes, and I was like, this makes a lot of sense. Subsequently started Coinfund in July of 2015 as sort of like a way of trying to put resources to studying and understanding this thing that was starting to happen, that we're still in the midst of. Mined some of the first blocks on Ethereum Frontier in the summer of 2015. I think less than block 1,000 Coinfund did. And the rest is history. And since then, we've kind of grown and expanded and worked with a bunch of people in the space. As an investor, we're now in our second fund, backed by a big VC firm in the United States called Venrock and David Pakman. We have 8 folks working in Brooklyn doing investments. And most recent investment that we announced was $3 together with Placeholder and Venrock.
That's awesome. Yeah, what a great trajectory you guys have had. I was a lurker on your Slack for years. In fact, I think I pretty much learned most of my knowledge of the space through hanging out and listening to all the people that you brought together there.
You guys were super early, and our Slack was I guess one of the earliest places where you can go and sit with people studying the technology of blockchains and watching the crypto space. And now there's like thousands of places like that on Telegram and a bunch of research houses and so forth. But we didn't have any of that back then. That was a great community. It's still going amazingly. Of course, it's probably time to sunset it, but there's still people in our Slack every day, kind of talking about crypto.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about the NFT world and how you began to get interested in that.
Yeah. Well, I've always been interested in the idea of art. I've been doing art kind of on a personal level, pretty much all my life. I'm a very, technical person. I studied math and computer science, as I said, but I've always had like this other part of my brain that I use for photography and making paintings and stuff like that. I tend to cycle through different kinds of creative endeavors. So, most recently this year, I spent a lot of time in the realm of digital art, and partially that was for work because I really wanted to immerse myself in that world and put myself in the mind frame of someone using these technologies as an artist. And partially it was to try to help jumpstart the demand side of the digital art market as I see it kind of developing over time. We have an investment at Coinfund. It's a company called Additional, and as it stands today, Additional is kind of a Instagram almost, where you can take the content of your post and turn that into a limited edition NFT. And so what I started to do was, besides creating NFTs on the platform, I also started to curate the NFTs of other artists that were there. And then sort of that expanded to other platforms. And I launched earlier this year, I launched basically a digital gallery called First Edition. You can see it if you go to firstedition.art. And it's basically just a bunch of curated artworks that have been put forward as non-fungible token works.
That's really interesting how the different layers are coming together there. When you're curating in First Edition, do you actually have to hold the NFTs that you're showing there?
So First Edition, in the sense of being a gallery, it wants to make sales, right? It wants to help people who are in the business of collecting art, or just more as an enthusiast who's trying to just buy a bunch of NFTs. It's helping them to curate the content and sort of help them make a decision about what to buy. Mm. And as such, ideally, First Edition has custody of the works and is able to put them on, we usually use OpenSea there, but we have used other platforms as well. And so when someone buys the work, it goes kind of in the First Edition account. Now, this makes a special sense on First Edition because you can go and actually collect like Edition 2, Edition 3, or even Edition 1 if you manage to trade with the artist. Maybe it's worth it to say a few words about how Additional works. So if you're the artist, you choose the number of editions for your NFT. So for example, I usually do 4, right? So I say I want 4 editions. The original number 1 goes to the artist, and 2, 3, and 4 can get claimed by other users on that platform. So First Edition tries to collect as many first editions as it can, but it also has like edition 2s or just like rare ones, or CryptoKitty number 12, for example.
Mm. It's really a fantastic platform. I mean, I can imagine that there must be quite a lot of throughput from something like that. I mean, okay, it's very early days now, but if you can, point your camera, take a picture, produce an NFT, I can imagine that in the future, the barrier to entry to creating a piece of artwork is very low on that particular platform. Was that part of the reason why you felt curation was such a central aspect to this space growing? It's not necessarily a big problem to have with people producing artwork very quickly, but a lot of it's down to story and effort and work, and it's important that comes through.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if you look at sort of the artists on Instagram, these tend to be like real world artists, and they snap photos of their works or their paintings or whatever, put it on Instagram. There's tons of stuff. There's a there's a hashtag for acrylic paintings and oil paintings and clay and digital art and everything. And sort of the role of Instagram in the general world of art, I think, is to curate a lot of stuff, categorize it, and then people who are interested in that type of work can go and see it. In the same way, in the blockchain space and the NFT space, I think it's super important to have ways of categorizing and curating art. Curation is one part of it, but the other part of it is sort of social proof, right? If your work makes it into a gallery in Soho, you must have done something right as an artist to sort of prove your worth. If your NFT makes it into known origin or super rare or maybe first edition or many of the other art galleries that exist today inside of the virtual worlds, right? Then maybe you did something right as an artist.
Yeah, exactly. So, a lot of it still comes down to talent, hard work, and, putting yourself out there and building a story around who you are and what you're making.
Right.
That doesn't go away.
And that's super critical, if you're taking the position that, the reason that NFTs are interesting for digital art is because it opens up a global marketplace where people can buy art and create almost like a sustainable business model for artists where it didn't exist before. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, just in general, right? Like in the traditional art world, maybe about like 1% of artists actually, get compensated well, right? That they can have art as a full-time career and have a good salary and be able to afford to live and do their work, right? One of the reasons that's true is because of all of the centralization in the art world. There's literally like 100 major entities that buy art in the world. They're galleries, auction houses, right? And so it's incredibly hard to get into that stream of work as an artist. Now, when we go to NFTs, the promise of using a blockchain and using a global digital technology to distribute your art as an artist, it results in people perhaps being able to monetize their art more. Like I can't tell you how many times I've been on Instagram and I have a bunch of art people on my Instagram and I look at a work and I'm like, I would totally pay this person $10, not even to own the art, but just to like let them know how much I appreciated looking at it, right? But I have no pay button on Instagram. I can't acquire their work on Instagram. And so this is part of the reason why digital art in NFT form is so exciting, because I feel like you have a bunch of different business models now where these people who do art all day long and that's what they want to do with their lives can actually make money from that. And you go from 1% of people being able to monetize their talents to maybe 10% or maybe 20%, right? And whatever it is, that's huge impact.
And what sort of growth are you seeing in the area in terms of interest of people buying art and the amount of volume that's moving in these networks?
Yeah, so it's very early. And so if you look at blockchain sort of holistically, there are very few areas in blockchain that generate revenue today. In fact, you could probably count them on one hand. One of them is, if you're like some kind of exchange, right? Some usually centralized exchange. And I would say there's a few other auxiliary services around that probably generate a bunch of revenue today. But if you look at sort of, quote unquote DApp use cases, in this case, this would be like NFT origination, right? You don't really see a lot of dApps generating revenue. You have DeFi also, right? You have people locking in Ether and lending and borrowing and things like that. But those like exchange and DeFi are probably the two areas that generate the most sort of financial interest. Mm-hmm. I think that the NFT space this year has also generated revenue. It has not been a lot of revenue. You can go look at like OpenSea and you can see like how many digital assets of what kind of trading hands. You can sort of estimate what their yearly revenue has been. And I would probably bet it's like under $1 million, which is not a lot at all. But there's this really interesting market product fit between art people and blockchain stuff. It's really interesting. Art people think technology is cool. They're willing to like experiment with it. They're willing to try a new platform. they're willing to pay a little bit of money to do that. And they're willing to do silly things like buy a digital picture of a crypto kitty, right? Because they think it's just novel, right? And so you do see folks spending money on art. There was a fair called CADAF earlier this year in New York. Winklevoss brothers came and they bought a CryptoPunk. In fact, a lot of the art, the digital NFT art in that show was sold out. For first edition, I bought an image by an artist who's also here in New York called Dmitry Cherniak, and he generates his art by writing JavaScript programs. It's sort of like generative. He's a generative artist, and I bought a physical print of his work as well as an NFT of that same work on the blockchain. And I have the physical print hanging up in my apartment, and I have the NFT on sale at first edition if you'd like to take a look. But this is a guy who is a legit sort of in the scene artist in New York City, has his works going at at various auctions here for real money.
That's cool. Does he have the same amount of NFTs as physical prints? Are they all paired together?
I think he was like sort of experimenting, but I don't think all of his works are digitized this way. But if you think about like what are the best candidates in the art world, right, for becoming NFTs, well, those are certainly, I think, digital artworks. Digital artworks, they don't really have an original, if you think about it, right? If you produce, some kind of Photoshop image, and then I send that to George by email, I've just created 3 copies of it, like one on my phone, one on my desktop, one on George's desktop. Where does the original live? And I think because of the ethereality, if you will, of that kind of artwork, when you put it on the blockchain and you suddenly make it scarce, and you say, "Oh, this is the thing that represents the ownership of the work," that makes total sense. And the analog in the real world is, "Oh, this is the certificate of authenticity for the work."
Yeah, that is the reason why I find this space so exciting, and part of it is trying to understand that shift of perception from going from physical scarcity. I have the original up on my wall, or I have a poster of it. And I understand the difference between those two things. And that shift across to the digital space. I was in crypto for a long time, so I sort of felt that pull of what digital scarcity represented, and I think that's why I'm so excited. Is that sense of ownership, being able to transfer ownership, and also to create those sort of ancillary experiences around ownership of these items. I feel like we're heading into a world where that shift is going to be incredibly exciting to watch. What do you think is our best candidate for bringing that shift? Is it art? Is it gaming? Is it the collectible side of things? A lot of people point to gaming as their sort of favorite candidate, but how do you think about the journey towards mass adoption, if you can call it that?
Well, yeah. So probably like 3 things. So if you talk to investor-minded folks, and when I say this, I think about our partnership with the folks at Venrock. And what was Venrock's first investment in the blockchain space? Well, they led a pretty big round of crypto kitties last year. So they're very interested in this area of digital collectibles. We see Fortnite and other games of that nature now doing billions of dollars in sales. We see platforms like Oculus, recently got an Oculus Quest, which is really cool. Also basically trading in digital assets. The unit of digital asset in Oculus is a VR experience, but it could get a little bit more granular later if you can transfer assets back and forth, right? So for the investor-minded folks, they're like, "Oh, I need that story. I need the billions of dollars," right? Then you get to the other application, which I think folks in crypto have talked about a lot in the context of tokenization, right? So what about the Mona Lisa? What about physical works whose ownership you can, for example, fractionalize? recently there was a startup which you can go and download now on your phone. The product's called Otis, where you can actually pay $25 and have a fractional ownership in the artwork of a real legit mainstream artist instead of having to dish out, millions of dollars to own a piece. And so you, as a almost like retail investor, right, can now participate in the appreciation of an artwork that you otherwise wouldn't be able to afford because there's like $10 million, or it's Damien Hirst's, diamond encrusted human skull that's going for $50 million or whatever it is. And I think the third thing, and this is the thing that's most interesting to me, sort of like long term, is the idea that by enabling digital art, so now not collectibles, not physical art, but specifically digital art to be tokenized, you're creating this new asset class where, first of all, retail people can own art and at a much lower price point. Artists can have a sustainable business model. And whereas art previously was an asset for kind of like rich people to write off taxes or whatever it is they do with it, you can now use art as an investment asset class for retail people. And I think that's potentially a huge market. Again, super early and needs to develop over time, but I think it inevitably will.
Yeah, that's a really good breakdown of the space. A lot of that entails, I guess the best way to put it is signaling, but people need a space in which to show what they have to some degree. And do you feel like that area is growing quick enough? I mean, I know we've taken a walk around Cryptovoxels, and we've seen all kinds of places, and and I actually had a really interesting one the other day. I walked up a flight of stairs, and I was doing it on my mobile phone, and even on a tiny little screen, I felt like I was actually somewhere, looking at someone's collection. And I know Decentraland as well is another one that another space in which that can happen. How important do you feel is the ecosystem of signaling around this? Because clearly it's a large part of the physical art world.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think that there's not enough places today where if you are the owner of an NFT collectible or digital artwork, that you can actually go and sort of display it or make use of it. So you bring up Cryptovoxels and Decentraland, which are, for anyone who doesn't know, those are like 3D VR worlds. As a matter of fact, first edition, I built a digital gallery in Cryptovoxels. It's called the Winding Gallery because it's sort of like a spoof of the Guggenheim Museum with this winding staircase. But if you put on a VR helmet and you stand in the lobby of the Winding Gallery and you kind of look up, you realize like how big of a place that is, and it's almost real, right? And so that is one example of, hey, I bought a bunch of work, I can go put it on the wall in my virtual gallery. It's virtual work, virtual gallery. It makes total sense. But I think that for this space to really go mainstream, we need a lot more venues and a lot more use cases for this art. There's actually like 3 or 4 companies already on the market for like years where they provide digital picture frames that you can hang up in your house, and then using a computer and the internet, whatever, you can upload some kind of image into that picture frame. Well, now that we have things like OpenSea, now that we have NFTs, wouldn't it make so much sense to just have that picture frame be, a portal into a market where you can buy art, and then on Christmas you can load up the red and green art, and then on Halloween, right, you can load up the orange and black art, and so on and so forth. So in a way, those picture frame manufacturers were like really early, and I don't think that's a huge like space today, but people do use that tech, and it's still pretty expensive. But if you combine that tech with a marketplace of digital art that anyone in the world can contribute to through this sort of open technology, I think that opens up a new revenue model for that tech. And finally, like, we need more than that, right? Not just virtual galleries, not just digital picture frames. We need more. We need like ways that we can invest in art, that we can have a portfolio of art, that we can, combine different artworks in the same place and fractionalize ownership in that. Maybe we should be able to display artwork in Times Square, like using an auction that is like public, or and so on and so on and so forth, right? So I think it's very early, George, to answer your question, and I think people are working on it, but it's first they want to see that market develop a little bit more, and then I think we'll see a lot more use cases.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thanks.
Cool. So you've really got a foot in both parks here, being an investor and a technologist, and then being an artist as well. Would you say that this excites you more from an artistic perspective, or more from a sort of technology point of view, or is it relatively even?
From an investment perspective, I think there's so much more to do between now and when this particular digital art space that I've been talking about becomes like viable, or even just NFTs become viable. I do think like in collectibles are kind of a more maybe like high probability space that we'll see mainstream use maybe sooner there. As an investor, I'm super excited about things that develop new markets, right? Because that's where you see the biggest growth. But I'm also realistic about the fact that we're not going to see that growth for many years. Like, it's going to take a lot more technology, a lot more participation, a lot more marketing to develop the market. As an artist, I'm thrilled because I personally was able to sell a few of my generative art pieces for a few $100 a piece. And because I'm not a full-time artist, because I'm just an enthusiast, the fact that I can sell work online is like a game changer. But more importantly, when we launched the gallery inside of Cryptovoxels, we actually had an opening show where I featured another artist. His name is O Savage. And this is a person who is, he's a Nigerian immigrant. He lives in Houston, Texas. 12 hours a day, he drives an ambulance 6 days a week. And has always, his entire life, been interested in art, and has started to create digital art on his phone, and eventually started posting it to Additional, where he caught our attention. And we featured him as the opening gallery of this virtual gallery. He was able to sell a work for about $350 worth of ether, and that amount of money is actually a very substantial amount of money for him and his family. And he was like, I can't believe it. My wife didn't even believe me that that we did this. And to me, like, that's like social impact right there, from just allowing a global technology to be the platform upon which this art is created. And so I want to see a lot more of that. And that's what really gets me excited.
Thank you so much for your thoughts, Jake.
Yeah, you got it.
It's been fantastic to hear your journey and your thoughts.
Just before we finish, where do you see NFTs in, say, 5 years?
NFTs?
Yeah, I mean the whole NFT space. Do you see it really penetrating mainstream and being used daily by people?
I would think that it will not be, like, in 5 years, I don't think like everybody in the mainstream world will be using it in the same sense that they use like social media. I just don't think that that's the like end use case of NFTs. But I think we'll probably start to see indications of the major markets where NFTs will live. So like, if NFTs are going to transform gaming and skins and Fortnite and collectibles, and you probably read about how Dapper Labs is going and tokenizing sort of NBA assets and things like that. If those things are going to take off in the digital future, then within 5 years, I'm certain that we'll have signal, whether that's those markets are thriving or not. I think that's where we're most likely to be, and probably in 5 years we'll see a lot more progress in the art world and its relationship to blockchains and NFTs. So, if digital art is a class of art that will become a little bit more accepted as an art form, I think we'll see more people using NFTs to sell it and move it.
And a bit of a random question on the side. Are you going to be setting up a space within Decentraland as well?
Yeah, so I'm a kind of an early advisor to Decentraland and have known Ari for a while, and I've definitely started to look at the Decentraland SDK to try to understand how spaces are built inside that world. So tentatively tracking to get some kind of first edition gallery out there, but no launches yet.
No, okay. Is their direction different to Cryptovoxels? Do you see it as what they're trying to get as an end game?
Yeah, I think that interestingly enough, I don't think virtual worlds are a zero-sum game. Or I should say that it's a winner-take-all kind of space, right? I think that different virtual worlds have different properties and uses. Like, for example, in Cryptovoxels, it's really easy to build, to build buildings in that world because you can literally build them brick by brick inside of the experience. Whereas in Decentraland, you actually, have to know 3D animation software, you have to know JavaScript, you have to actually code the scene, and it takes a lot more, technical expertise to build scenes there. Secondly, the experiences are different, just like the aesthetic is different. One world might be more programmable than another, so you could program automations, whereas in another world it might be just for the sake of hanging out with other people, right? So I think what we'll see is many different virtual worlds, and I bet you, just like blockchains are becoming interoperable, these virtual worlds you'll be able to teleport from Cryptovoxels into Decentraland and back.
That would be awesome. Well, we've covered a lot. Do you think it would be worthwhile having a quick chat about gerbils and the weird and wonderful experiment we're running with this podcast?
Yeah,
sure.
In the sort of the original sort of idea of this, the gestation of this podcast as such was around the idea of can you build a community by producing an NFT?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was all about story, and we were like, well, if we can build a story around who we talk to, and sort of follow the journey of the space as it gets bigger, while also sort of creating these sort of rather sort of cheeky personalities as we go, and then ask the internet to come back with their idea of what a meme gerbil would be. So FOMO gerbil, the gerbil of Wall Street, that kind of thing. And we've had some, the last podcast we did was our first experiment in that. So we created our Twitter feed, and we said, okay, Genesis Gerbil is the first gerbil that we're gonna do, and it needs a description. And the idea is essentially that the best description, we will create the artwork for that NFT off that description.
That's really good.
So you can write a tweet in, it gets read out on the podcast, and next thing you know, you're being sent an illustration of that response that you gave us.
Mm-hmm.
And in so doing, sort of creating a cycle of interest and people sort of engaging with us. So it's using NFTs in a community building way, I guess, and trying to get people to be creative and funny.
That's cool. So just to be clear, who gets NFTs?
So anyone who responds that we read out on the show gets sent an NFT.
Okay, cool, awesome.
So it's like the funniest and most creative content that comes back to us, we sort of reward with token.
Do I get an NFT for being a guest on the show?
Yes,
we certainly do. Absolutely, you can have. Wait, which one are we going to do this way? This
second official Gerbil NFT is going to be ICO Gerbil.
Nice. Okay, that's a good one. And as long as it's scarce, it's a good candidate for listing it on first edition, right? So how many ICO gerbils do you think you'll issue here?
Well, that depends on Twitter. So Genesis Gerbil, there's only going to be about 20 gerbils in existence.
Oh, nice.
So
cool.
they're quite rare.
Yeah, so as the listenership grows, the less scarce they'll become. So being our second guest, I'm sure that ICO Gerbil is going to be one of a hot pick to try and find somewhere.
Yeah. Have you guys seen Block Cities at all?
Yeah. I got sent
You got
one
sent because you bumped into the guy at Web3.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, that's right. He was very kind to send me one.
Oh, cool. So they there's a building here in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where I am right now, which is it's called the Williamsburg Hotel. The guys who built it actually do a lot for the crypto community around here. They host a lot of meetups in there and events and stuff. And the Block Cities guys, they did this like limited edition Williamsburg Hotel Block Cities building. And that was like super exciting. So this idea of like, special edition commemorative NFTs is really cool. And I like it a lot. And we actually have both the Williamsburg Hotel featured on first edition, as well as Block Cities building number 1, which we got at auction.
Oh, nice.
Well, you see, what's so great about that is that you're beginning to envelop a story into what it is. And so people will come to understand that story, understand the purpose of the building and what it did in the real world, and then you're sort of building value into that item through the story of how it came to be. Mm-hmm. And I guess we're doing the same in the sense that we're trying to kind of bring out the wit and the charisma of some aspects of crypto Twitter, and as that begin to build a story around these items.
Well and carefully said.
Well, we've had some great responses so far to our thing. Do you want to read one out? Just to see what they sound like.
Okay, so the NSA bred ninja hacker Gerbils to infiltrate Domino's Pizza, securing endless free deliveries. One Gerbil escaped with a laptop and fused computer science, cryptography, and Austrian economics together to unleash an unstoppable wave of shitcoins.
Well, that's definitely come from crypto Twitter. So it's based. That's a great example. That's a sort of an example of what comes back our way, and they're great fun to get.
So let me ask you guys what NFT projects are you guys seeing that you're excited about?
I'm completely bonkers about Clovers. Clovers.net. I don't know why. It's something to do with it's. Well, I know why. The UX is amazing. I don't know if you came across Clovers during the DAppCon Web3 thing. It's this wonderful app that has an algorithm that finds these patterns, and every now and again a pattern is symmetrical, and there's this whole community building up around finding these symmetrical patterns. But what I love about it is that that's only half the story, right? Because what happens next is the humans that are collecting them start putting their vision of what these things represent to them. So people are they're finding shapes of bats and smiles and strange animals and heart shapes, and so they kind of bring their humanity to these shapes, and that's what gives them value. So when you begin to look at the ones that have sort of on sale for big money, you can see it's because yes, they're rare, they're maybe symmetrical in many different ways, and you can spin them and so on and so forth, but you get ones that they just look like something that humans recognize,
right?
And that's really, really cool, and it gets you. And you kind of mine it in the background. You can press a button that says pig, and the pig will go and sort of
pick out the symmetrical ones.
Yeah, literally go through thousands of these potential patterns, and then you get this wonderful kind of confetti explosion when the computer finds a symmetrical clover, and you get this massive sort of dopamine hit with all the confetti goes everywhere, and you kind of anyway. So I've been collecting them, and spending good ether, really. It's definitely got me. So that's my favorite thing of the moment.
I'm looking at the website now. That's really cool. I love the idea that you can. It says wander in your garden and pick your own clovers, right? So I love the idea that the clovers that become, most sought, perhaps, or lifted to the foreground are the ones that are sort of naturally demanded by the people who are picking them out. So that's really cool. It's just like take this generative artwork and let the people decide which pieces are the most impactful and therefore the most valuable. So this is really awesome.
Yeah, you've got it, and wrap it in a way that is easy to use, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's also why it's caught me. Because it's not always easy to interact with these things, and I think these guys have done a really good job at making it hands-on and easy to kind of understand and collect, and and
they've sort of merged gaming and artwork.
Well, there's definitely a gamification mechanic there.
Yeah.
It's really quite sophisticated. A lot of these patterns are collected by a smart contract, and you can buy them off a contract called Clovers. Anyway, it's worth diving into.
Cool. Yeah, it makes sense. I'll definitely check it out.
How about you, Luke?
Well, actually, Clovers is the one that I've been playing with.
Oh, okay. We're both Clover heads.
But I do love the 3D worlds. So Cryptovoxels. I went and had a look at your gallery there, and just thought it was really cool.
Oh, thank you.
And I had I got a free crypto kitty with Dapper and set up a scene in Decentraland and put my kitty up on the wall, and it was just a moment where I went, oh, okay, yeah, this is really cool. I get it.
Well, just in the first part of this year, if you had walked through, Cryptovoxels was essentially the only blockchain virtual world in production. If you walk through Cryptovoxels, what you'd notice is that most of the structures that were built and being visited by people in that world were actually art galleries. And people did some really, really creative things, right? They had, this very complex architecture. I built a building that was pretty tall. Someone else built a building that was very wide, but the core use case, and this goes for both the NFTs on display and the world itself, was around art, right? So the world itself was making money because people were buying kind of plots of land at auction in order to create art galleries. And then people who were visiting the art galleries were buying the work or bidding on the work, whatever it might be, and generating revenue for the artists and the gallery. So right there, you have your first virtual decentralized business model, if you will, signaling that there might be a lot more there.
Yeah, that's really cool. Can you interact with other people in Cryptovoxels at the same time?
Yeah, you can. If you're around other folks, you see them as a little avatar, and they do have a little chat. That world was developing very rapidly, and I haven't logged in a few weeks, so there might even be new features where you can interact with people now.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, because I didn't see anyone whilst I was there. I was just exploring. I found a little cave with a Sigourney Weaver and an alien up on the wall, and it was all dark and green, and someone had recreated this scene from Aliens.
Someone, I don't know if you saw this, and I don't know if it still exists, but early on there was someone recreated what they called the University of Frankfurt, and they literally built an entire university-looking building, and it had all these classrooms and the foyer and everything. It was just very intricate, and I'm like, who has time for this? Because you literally have to build it block by block in the software.
Well, awesome. I guess that's the wonderful thing about the space, right? There are so many people with so many different ideas, and if you give them the tools to play around and make stuff, then I think it's going to be a really interesting future.
For sure.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Jake. Do you have anything you want to add, or anything else you want to talk about?
Well, if anyone who's listening is is looking at the NFT space, is building products in NFTs, especially origination platforms. If you're an artist who's looking to dabble in NFTs as a way of distributing your work, come chat with me. My DMs are open on Twitter. And I've spent a bunch of time studying this space, and I'd love to continue looking at the projects that people are building.
Jake, thank you so much, mate. Really, really kind.
You got it. Thank you guys for having me. This was super fun, and keep up the great work with the podcasting and the NFTs.
We'll send you your gerbil once we're minting.
Sweet. I'll put it in first edition.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay. So we need to mint some gerbils, George.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we closed the entries for Genesis Gerbil, and we need to talk about who's going to get them.
All the fantastic responses that we had back. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to send us the descriptions for Genesis Gerbil.
Some of them really made us laugh out
Made
loud.
us laugh out loud. Hopefully it'll make you laugh out loud too. There's definitely some brilliant ones in there.
We're going to start with a couple of our favourites and then come to the winner at the end. First up, we've got Dion W. Research. A gerbil of mystery, and touted as the original cypherpunk, armed with nothing but a laptop, plentiful donuts, and a desire for change, has set the stage for a revolution. #Genesis Gerbil.
Well, I mean, that's just right on point, isn't it?
On point. Thank you, Dion.
Yep. Who we got up next?
Joe the Martian.
Genesis Gerbil addressed the large crowd in a passionate yet somewhat squeaky voice.
For too long, my brother and sister gerbils have been second-class animals. But I tell you that fat cats and even dirty rats have had their day. I imagine a future where all gerbil kind can be proud to have a class of assets named after us. No longer will we be thought of as an easy option for a pet or a plaything for perverts. I am not a fun gerbil. I am a deadly serious one. We are the future!
Oh my god, what? Joe, mate, seriously, dude, thank you for that. That's really unusual. Okay. I'm gonna lose it on that one. Let's move
Before
on.
George, yeah. Okay, next one is from Luke 1E, the man with a great name. 2008, at an MIT lab, a group of researchers accidentally fused cryptography and economics whilst trying to port Snake onto Android. Pandora's box had been opened. The Genesis Gerbil had been let out of the bag. The decentralized future began.
Brilliant. Yep, that's kind of what we asked for. Thank you very much, Luke.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Yeah, I guess I get the Snake reference, Android 2008, all kind of about the same time.
You'd have to be around 40 to remember Snake. Anyway.
Yeah, I think so.
So who we got next? Moving on.
Edouard Bessier.
Thanks for this, Edouard. Okay. As part of an ingenious plan to create the non-fungibles, Genesis Gerbil created Bitcoin, only for it to be hijacked by Dogecoin and almost lost forever in a wave of shitcoins. Luckily, our hero persevered, and after a dodgy IEO on a random exchange, finally the time had come. Well, I mean, that's very current, Edouard. Thank you very much. The IEOs are very current. We're huge fans of Dogecoin, obviously.
Obviously, yes.
And altogether, yes, that made huge amounts of sense. Thanks.
Coinscribe went in with a mammoth entry, 7 tweets.
A tweet storm of genius. Do you want to give this? Do you want to give this a whirl?
I think you're going to have to do this one, dude.
Oh God, okay. Right, let's begin. Here we go.
Do you want me to hold the screen up?
Yeah, you're good. The non-fun gerbil, up until January 2009, was known to all of his gerbil mates as the fun gerbil. The fun gerbil lived in a cage next to his best buddy Fun Hamster on the desk of their kindly computer programmer master. On the 2nd of January 2009, their kindly master suddenly installed a super slick carbon fibre hamster wheel in the cage of Fun Hamster, along with a little hamster laptop. Fun Hamster immediately started doing what he loved to do, run like a gazelle. And he just kept on running. Then, on the 3rd of January 2009, the laptop screen blinked brightly with the words Block 1, 50 bitcoins. 10 minutes later or so, it did it again. Block 2, 50 bitcoins. And so it went on. Within a few years, Fun Hamster started redecorating and building extensions to his cage. He even built a garage and bought a bright red Lamborghini. The more he ran, the more he bought. Eventually, he'd bought so much stuff he stopped running and started cruising around his cage in a Lambo instead. Over the course of those 10 years, FunGerbil's friends noticed that he had stopped being so fun. He started gnawing at the bars of his cage and drinking scotch for breakfast. However hard they tried, they just couldn't bring him round. Eventually they gave up. And since then, he's become colloquially known as the non-fungible. They did manage to convince him to go to rehab, though, and when his program was complete, he put this grim past behind him and is now proudly relaunching himself today as Genesis Gerbil, if still a rather non-fun gerbil.
Well, a lot of time.
I was lost there. Were you lost? I was lost in a world of Lambos and gerbils. It's a beautiful thing.
In fact, from this, we thought that for the next gerbil, we won't limit it to one tweet because it allows people to be...
Absolutely. If you want to write us an entire PhD thesis on ICO gerbil, go right ahead. Thank you, CoinScrum, for that brilliant piece of
art.
Yes, art, exactly.
Yes.
Unfortunately, though, it has come runner-up because the winner is even weirder than that. Yep. Thank you, Gareth Bedford, for this truly awe-inspiringly odd piece of Twitter.
Genesis Adam Gerbil was alone and bored and hungry, but that's another matter. The Gerbinet was a confusing place, and he had no one to discuss with him the great questions he had. What is the value of a gerbil? Is a fun one better than a non-fun one? Where is the peanut butter? Surely 2 gerbils would be better than 1, and many gerbils better than none. The button sat mutely, daring him to press it. So Adam pressed the button.
I have so many questions. But they shall have to remain unanswered. That's our winner. We're going to illustrate whatever that was, and what's going to come out is going to be massively collectible.
Yeah. Our artist, as we speak, is working day and night
to produce the button and the peanut butter.
So Genesis Gerbil tokens will be sent out to everyone who participated and
a couple of others who were very nice to us,
who helped out. Yeah, and we have our winner. Well done, Gareth.
Yeah, nice one, mate.
Next week we are doing ICO Gerbil.
Yeah, which should be a cracker. Everyone, nearly everyone in our space lived through that extraordinary time, and there's many different memes that could be
I have a
thought
feeling
up.
This one's going to be a lot easier.
This one might be a little easier.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
It's so
See what we
get. Catch you later.
Cheers. See you next time.
Yummy!